Under the buzzing lights of Jefferson High, a crowd gathered in the cafeteria, laughter echoing against the tiled walls, all of it at the expense of one quiet student, a boy who spoke little, walked with his head low, and carried a beat-up backpack that seemed older than him. His name was Marcus, and for months he had been the prime target of Troy, the school's golden boy, a star athlete, rich, loud, admired, feared, the kind of bully who thrived on making others small. Today, though, Troy had planned something bigger, something crueler, a humiliation Marcus would never forget. The cafeteria doors burst open and Troy strutted in with his entourage, his Letterman jacket slung over his shoulder, his smirk wide and cruel. He shouted across the room, "Hey Marcus, you think you're smart? You think you're better than us? Let's see you prove it." From behind his back he revealed a chessboard, pieces rattling as he slammed it down on the table. The crowd gasped, half amused, half eager for the show, because everyone knew Troy had been bragging for weeks about his new obsession with chess, boasting about beating his little brother, his neighbors, even challenging a teacher. He called himself the king. And now, he wanted to crown his dominance by embarrassing Marcus in front of everyone. Marcus froze, his heart thudding, his stomach churning. Every part of him wanted to walk away to hide, but Troy wasn't giving him the choice. "Sit down," Troy demanded, his voice dripping with mockery, "unless you're scared." The crowd jeered, "Sit, sit, sit." Their voices hammered against Marcus's chest, and so, with trembling hands, he lowered himself onto the chair, eyes cast down, his silence feeding Troy's arrogance. The bully leaned across the table, flashing a grin. "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you." The pieces were set, the timer borrowed from the chess club ticked, and the game began. At first Troy played aggressively, knocking his pawns forward with loud snaps. His friends cheered each move, and Marcus sat quietly, moving carefully, methodically, unnoticed, his eyes sharp though his face remained calm. Every once in a while, the faintest flicker of confidence crossed his lips, but no one noticed except a few students at the back, kids who knew Marcus from the library where he spent hours bent over chess books, studying grandmaster strategies, rehearsing moves in silence. He was no ordinary player, but Troy had no idea. Minutes passed and the board began to shift. Troy's laughter grew louder, but his moves became reckless, sloppy, pieces disappeared, a knight here, a bishop there, Marcus's traps invisible until it was too late. Troy's queen was cornered, and for the first time his grin faltered, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. The crowd noticed, whispers spreading, "Wait, is Marcus winning?" Troy slammed his fist against the table. "Beginner's luck," he barked, but inside he felt something he hadn't felt in years, fear. The game dragged on, each move slicing through the silence. Marcus leaned back, his shoulders straightening, his confidence no longer hidden, and then with a calm voice the cafeteria had never heard before, he whispered the word that sent chills through the crowd, "Checkmate." The room exploded, gasps, cheers, laughter. Everyone stared at Troy's face, pale, stunned, humiliated, his friends backing away as if the throne had been ripped out from under him. Marcus, the quiet boy, the invisible target, had just toppled the king. For the first time, Marcus raised his eyes to Troy, not with arrogance, not with cruelty, but with a piercing steadiness that spoke louder than words. Troy tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Best 2 out of 3, he muttered, though the tremble in his hands betrayed him, and the crowd knew the truth. The balance of power had shifted, the hunter had become the hunted, and justice, sweet and unexpected, had been served in the most unlikely of arenas, a chessboard in a high school cafeteria. But as the cheers died down, as Marcus stood to leave, backpack slung over his shoulder, another voice cut through the crowd, a voice calm, deep, chilling. It came from the corner of the room where a tall student had been watching in silence, his eyes sharp, his presence heavy. "Impressive," he said, stepping forward, his gaze locked on Marcus. "But Troy was just the pawn. Wait until you face the real player." The cafeteria fell silent again, tension thick as steel, and Marcus froze mid-step, realizing the game he had just won was only the beginning, and the true battle, the one that could break him or crown him, had yet to begin. The cafeteria still buzzed with the echoes of Marcus's victory, whispers running like wildfire through the halls of Jefferson High, but in the middle of it all, Marcus's eyes locked with the stranger who had stepped forward, a tall figure known only as Derek, a quiet senior who rarely spoke, yet his reputation whispered louder than Troy's shouts ever had. Some said Derek had been captain of the chess club before vanishing from competitions. Others swore he had trained with state champions. But everyone agreed on one thing: he never lost. The crowd, sensing a storm, shifted back, clearing space between the two. Derek's stare never wavered, his voice calm, cutting through the tension. "You think you've won something, Marcus, but Troy was just noise, a distraction, I'm the one who moves the real pieces. Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Part of him wanted to walk away, to leave this nightmare behind, but another part, the part that had survived years of torment and silence, refused to back down. Then sit, Marcus said quietly, the words shocking even himself. The crowd gasped, Troy's humiliation now eclipsed by the possibility of a far greater showdown. Derek smiled faintly, a smile that carried no mockery, only confidence. Not here, he replied. A real game deserves a real board tomorrow in the library after school. With that, he turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. The students parted for him as if he were royalty, and the whispers followed. Marcus versus Derek, the match of the year. That night, Marcus sat at his small desk, the old chess set in front of him, pieces worn from endless practice, his mother's voice drifting from the kitchen, reminding him gently that he had nothing to prove. But Marcus knew this was bigger than him, bigger than Troy. This was about respect, about rewriting the rules of who got to be invisible and who got to be seen. He studied until his eyelids grew heavy, replaying matches of grandmasters in his mind, every move, every counter, every sacrifice. The next day the library was packed, students crammed between shelves, teachers pretending not to notice the commotion. The chessboard gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights, and Derek sat waiting, calm, composed, like a king already confident of victory. Marcus stepped forward, his hands trembling, but his gaze steady, and as he sat, a hush fell across the room. The game began, Derek opening with crisp, calculated moves, every piece placed with surgical precision. Marcus responded carefully, his memory pulling strategies from countless hours of study. Yet something about Derek's play unsettled him. It wasn't just good, it was uncanny. Every trap Marcus set was anticipated, every path blocked. It was as if Derek could read his mind. Piece by piece Marcus found himself pushed back, the crowd leaning forward with every move, whispers rising. Derek's unstoppable. Sweat formed on Marcus's brow, his queen under threat, his defenses crumbling, and then Derek leaned in, his voice low, meant only for Marcus. You think this is just a game, don't you? But you don't understand, you're not just fighting me, you're fighting what I represent. Marcus froze, the weight of those words cutting deeper than any move on the board. What did Derek mean? What did he represent? The crowd watched, breaths held, as Marcus faced a choice: protect his queen and drag the game out, or sacrifice her in a desperate gamble that could shift everything. His hand hovered over the piece, his heart pounding, and just as he reached for it, Derek smirked and whispered, "Go ahead, make your move, and watch how quickly the world turns against you." The room fell into a suffocating silence, Marcus's fingers trembling above the board, every eye locked on him, the outcome hanging on a single decision, and deep down he knew, this wasn't just about chess anymore. The library was silent, so silent that the ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like thunder. Every eye was fixed on Marcus, his hands still hovering over the queen, his heart hammering so loudly he thought the others could hear it. Derek leaned back, calm, confident, certain that he had cornered Marcus into a trap no high school kid could escape. The smirk on Derek's lips was the same smirk Marcus had seen on every bully's face for years. The smirk that said, "You don't matter, you can't win." And in that moment, something inside Marcus snapped. Not with fear, but with clarity. He remembered every time he'd been shoved into a locker, every time someone laughed at his clothes, every time he walked home with bruises and no one cared. He had played quiet his whole life. But chess had taught him something. Sometimes you have to give up your most valuable piece to win the war. With steady fingers, Marcus pushed his queen forward, sacrificing her. Gasps rippled through the room. "He's lost it," someone whispered. Derek's smirk widened. "Predictable," he muttered, swooping in to capture the queen. The crowd leaned closer, certain the game was over. But Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes sharpened, his hands moved with purpose, and suddenly his knights and bishops came alive, snapping into position like a trap closing shut. Within 3 moves, Derek's king was backed into a corner he hadn't seen coming. His smile faltered. Within 5, his defenses collapsed. And then Marcus whispered the word that had once humiliated Troy, but now carried even greater weight: checkmate. The library erupted. Cheers, shouts, laughter, a storm of voices rising in triumph. Students who had never spoken to Marcus slapped his back, shouted his name, lifted their phones to record the stunned face of Derek. The unbeatable, the untouchable, the one who had ruled in silence, now defeated by the boy no one believed in. But in the chaos, Derek didn't move. His eyes were locked on the board, his lips trembling, and when he finally looked up at Marcus, there was no anger, no rage, only a hollow, bitter laugh. "So this is how it ends," he said quietly. "The pawn becomes the king." His words cut through the noise, and for the first time, everyone realized Derek hadn't just been playing a game. He had been defending his pride, his identity. And losing to Marcus meant more than humiliation. It meant irrelevance. Marcus stood, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his face calm but his chest burning with emotions he couldn't name. For years he had been invisible. For years, people like Derek and Troy had treated him as if his silence made him weak. But today, justice had been served, not with fists, not with violence, but with the very thing no one thought mattered. A mind sharper than theirs, a will stronger than their cruelty. As Marcus walked out of the library, the crowd parting around him, he passed Troy slumped in the corner, eyes wide with disbelief. The same bully who had once laughed at him now couldn't even meet his gaze. And the irony burned bright. The boys who built their reputations by making Marcus small had just been destroyed by the very thing they mocked. His quiet, his patience, his mind. Outside, the sun hit Marcus's face, and for the first time he didn't bow his head. He lifted it high. The world had changed, and so had he. Justice wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but when it came it was undeniable. And deep in that silence, every student who had watched knew one truth. Underestimating Marcus had been their biggest mistake. And though his victory was complete, the memory of this day would haunt Troy and Derek forever. Justice had been served.